And so we're here on a Monday morning, and I'm in communication, although at a distance, from Pat McGart. How are you this morning, Pat?
Grandjude, I'm on a little island called Butte on the
Oh,
west coast. I think it's the west coast of Scotland. I'm never quite sure geography.
uh,
But we're in Scotland for a family function, and we have a couple of days to spare, so we're having a nice wee break.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. That's very good. Blood is thicker than water at all times.
Yeah, so I believe.
Okay, let's get to the pressing matter. Well, you can't avoid it. It's like a very well elephant in the room, and that is the coronation of Charles III. You said last Friday you weren't going to watch it. Did you keep your word?
Jude, I think I might be the only person on these islands that didn't see 1 second of the coronation. Hey, Jude, let me tell you something. Let's get this on the right. You know this thing about the blood ties and the kinship between Ulster and Scotland? Run this by you. On Friday, we were out in Scotland on Friday, come over in Larne Ferry over to Ryan, drove up. We stopped off in Irvine. We went into this wee cafe because we hadn't eaten and it was about 12 o'clock and we were on the go for about 8 hours. We just felt like a cup of coffee. And then Rosie, anyway, my dear missus, we got some coffee and a couple of scones and stuff. And she up to pay for them. First things first. And the girl looked at the Ulster sterling and went, oh, I don't know about that. She called the manager and the manager, we had to pay by card. So much for the old relationship between Scotland that even the money, it's plaything, it's monopoly money, it's not acceptable. That's the first thing. Then we drove on, Jude, and
that applies right throughout England, Pat, as well, and Wales, I'm sure.
I know, but you think the old blood brothers in Scotland, we're all blood brothers. You go over to Scotland, and we go back over to Ulster and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And it just thought, there wasn't much of a kinship there that even your money's not acceptable. But no, it's just a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, then we moved on, Jude, and we drove down. We ended up in Glasgow. And Jude, I drove through quite a few villages, and I was knowing the way I'm keeping my eye out. Jude, this sort of thing that there'd be, bunting and banner and flags and all this. Jude, it was noticeable by the fact that it was a very, very low key, and I mean low key. Not, in fact, when several times you'd hardly know anything was going on at all. Now, you can imagine, had it been in Northern Ireland, the 12th of July, and you're going through Larne or somewhere like that, and you'd see flags and buntings and all of that. Jude, so I don't know, this sort of kinship between Britain or Scotland and Ulster. And one final thing, my dear missus got up early on Friday morning and she was walking through Paisley and she met this guy coming towards her with the full Highland regalia, tam o' shanter, tartan coat, kilts, sporran, staff, Scottish type staff. And she and as usual, Rosie started chatting to him and she says, I love your regalia type thing and all that. And anyway, she said, as he was leaving, she says, and are you going to enjoy the coronation? And she says, he turned around, she says, I'm the sternest possible. And she says, indeed I am not, ma'am. He says, I'm going to an independence rally. So, Jude, I know the old values of king and country that Ulster Scots claim they have in common with the Scots. I wonder, is it, it's after my experience, and I accept they're very subjective. And by the way, there were a couple of other places we were in. There were people who weren't even watching the coronation. I was into one restaurant and it was on in the background. People weren't paying no attention to it whatsoever.
Well, it's the same here, Pat. Now, it's not that there aren't flags and bunting, and there are, but they're very surprisingly thin in the ground. I wasn't in Belfast, but I saw a clip from the news where there is, I think, a big screen in Belfast City Hall or outside Belfast City Hall. And there wasn't huge crowds by any means. It was a smattering of people, as far as I can make out. And they usually try to, emphasize the size of the crowd. So I just get a feeling that an awful lot of people weren't that wildly enthused about it. And I think it has to do with personality. I think they would turn out for Queen Elizabeth on her funeral and so on. Yeah. But I think a lot of them have reservations about Charles. Hard though he has tried, and despite the fact that the media have mentioned, and they're quite right too, that he had a time when it was neither profitable nor popular, Charles was on about the environment and putting his money where his, well, I don't know about that, but certainly putting into action things that protected the environment, and was laughed at for it. That's true, and all credit to him. but at the same time, he brings you see, there's the big figure that nobody can forget is Princess Di. You know, we
Yeah,
see Camilla there, and Queen Camilla, and you look at her, and immediately people thinking in the back of their mind about Princess Di. Now, clearly they've got past that in a way, but it's still there. It's still lurking, and it still, I think, diminishes the fervor with which they celebrated the coronation of Charles. Do you think?
yeah. I agree with you totally, Jude. And as well as that, you see, there's something about a woman like the Queen was. What was she? 26 or 27? She became the Queen,
Yeah,
and
25, I
you
think.
know, and on the death of her father, and she was sort of shunted into it against her will. There's something different about a 73-year-old man who's done not after a day's spade or a shovel to do a day's physical work, and he's now shunted into the top job, as it were. And you sort of going, there's something, he shouldn't be going for this job now. He should be off in the Barbados or somewhere, sort of lying on some sort of lilo or whatever. But it seems inappropriate that this man has spent all his life waiting on this, and now at the age of 73, when most of us are retired. In fact, he's older than I am, and he's taken up a new job, and I've been retired for years. And there's something, Jude, it doesn't just gel. There's
Well,
something, and I am not explaining it very well, but you get the point I'm making.
yeah, I do. But I'll make a prediction now that by the into the next 10 years, I mean, might not be here to follow through on it, but I'd say inside the
Either of
next
us might
10
be, of
years, Charles will retire
course, I
and
will. Yeah,
pass to
yeah,
William, because William was
yeah,
and the wife were very present, and their kids at the coronation. The British people are much more fond of William because you can see Diana in his face, and
yeah,
they just have that affection for that line,
yeah,
that lineage, which
yeah,
oddly enough is not
yeah,
royal. It's just
yeah.
from one of these noble
Yeah.
families. But
You noticed,
I said,
by the way, did you, from what I can gather, I was reading one of the papers yesterday. Harry was 3 seats back on his own.
yeah, yeah, his it's a tricky one. Well, he has sort of decided to pass on the whole thing, and I think he's burnt his bridges now, whether he likes it or not. Which is kind of odd in a way because he was the one who was out fighting wasn't he fighting in the
Yeah,
Falklands War?
but the funny thing, when the Queen died, he was the only one who was not allowed to wear a military uniform. Yet he was the only one that actually deserved to wear a military uniform. He had actually fought.
Is that right? I didn't know that. No,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, well, he is. I think the British people are largely trying to forget about him and focus simply
yeah.
on wills. In more general terms, Pat, would you have no sympathy with the fairly elaborate ceremonies and so on, and the big concert afterwards, of course, the next
Yeah,
day?
I did know some. I was reading a wee bit yesterday, and I got the Observer. Believe it or not, I haven't read it in years, but it's a very good paper actually. And they quoted people from all over the place. One of them was the Jamaican guy. He's a minister out there, and they can't wait to get rid of the monarchy. And another there was the interview. I think it was a Greek lady, and she said that when she watched the coronation, she realized how much of the stuff, the jewels and the crowns and the diamonds and whatever else, have been stolen from other countries, and she's as appropriate as being British. And there was some other guy who I can't remember, but basically they were saying, American, the whole treatment of Meghan Markle has not gone down well in a lot of the Commonwealth countries. They basically saw, or they have seen racism as they see it, the way she was treated. Like Prince Andrew was given a free run for some of his doings, yet Meghan Markle's she was almost pillar to post
But
by the media because
uh,
she fell foul of the old white elite.
what part of the media said what about her? Because I didn't hear any reporting directly or evidence that the royal family said bad stuff to her or
No, but if you read the Sun, the Daily Mail, the Express, there was obviously back several years ago, there was obviously a lot of briefing going on. Nothing appears in the papers without somebody planting the story. And it would seem, on the surface at the very least, that the palace, to quote that famous, was blaming Meghan Markle for what Prince Harry was doing and so on, that she was breaking up the royal family. And here was this interloper from America, etc., etc., etc. I know this claim, there was concern about what colour Harry's children would be seen, and she's
was that in the papers,
of
Pat?
mixed
Was
race.
that in any of the papers? Was that reported?
No, that was in the papers back then. She
Well, is it
remember she
true?
did an
Was
interview
it
with
true? Was it true?
I don't know, I wasn't there, so I don't. But she claimed on to Oprah Winfrey that she was asked directly by a certain member of the royal family about the color of their children and what and concern about the color of their children. And I take it what she was saying was the racism wasn't too far from the surface.
Well, I think two things about that. One is it's a very stupid question to ask because you can't tell. She wouldn't know, would she?
Yeah, no, yeah.
And secondly, I mean, you're really laying your racism out on the table there when you say that.
Yeah.
You could be a little bit more subtle in your racism than that. So I wouldn't want to be too hard on the way Meghan was treated. But anyway, I think they're a sideshow. The clear central figure now is Charles. I see him definitely as going inside 10, at the most 10 years, maybe less even, and Will's taking over. But I have to confess that while I admire the pageantry, I did watch a bit of it on the news particularly. The pomp and ceremony and the music and marching and cannons fired and so on was, I mean, inch perfect. Very impressive.
Absolutely.
Very stylish, marvelous music, etc. But I couldn't help but feel that the more perfect that was, the less substance there was behind it. If I'd come down from Mars and seen this, I'd have assumed this man Charles is the king of the world. He's been crowned and everybody in the world is his subject. I looked at the serried ranks of the palace guards, or whatever you call the bearskin guys, and I would have said that army's going to take on somebody and slaughter them. So you've got this effect of pomp and ceremony and power. But actually, we know that behind that, there's nothing. I mean, even in legal terms, Charles is nothing. And certainly Britain's role as a military power is seriously diminished. So you wonder, why do they do that? Is it an effort to fool people? Or is it they can't help themselves that, the way we bluster sometimes when we've done something wrong, we try to bluster our way out of it by insisting the very opposite. You're calling me a sinner. I'm really a saint. I'm a saint. I'm a saint.
Yeah. I think there's two things there, Jude. Like, as my dear wife has made the point millions of times, almost literally, so nobody does pomp and pageantry like the Brits, and that is factual. That horse guard parade, the golden coach, and all that sort of stuff.
The air conditioning,
brilliant for.
The air
conditioning. I know. But it's brilliant for tourism. Absolutely. Dude, I remember being in London some years back, and every second accent near Buckingham Palace, get a shot of that Leanne. The Americans, they love it. Absolutely.
What were they talking about getting a shot of?
No, Buckingham Palace. Standing outside they were all there with their cameras, and you see these little Japanese tourists and all the rest. They come from all over the world. The second thing, Jude, and it's much more important, that all gives them soft power. Absolutely a massive amount of soft power. It used to be that all these American presidents, now Biden's, he didn't show up, but he sent over his wife. But it used to be the American presidents all loved being, Trump loved all that stuff. Being invited to the Queen and going on these ducks and tails and all that sort of stuff. The duck tie or whatever the hell you call it these days, and they loved all that sort of stuff. So it gives them and it gives them entree into all these guys like Macron and so on come over, and even Ursula von der Leyen, when she was signing the Windsor Agreement, met up with Prince Charles. So it's it's a great photo opportunity. Dude, it's soft power, and it gives them a status in the world that maybe their actual reality doesn't deserve.
Yeah, I think it does give them soft power, all right. Although that thing about tourism is an interesting one. because people say, you know, we need the monarchy because look, it's hugely important for tourism. But we know that the Palace of Versailles and other places like that that were once occupied by royals, they still are a tremendous draw. You just finished saying there that people are outside Buck House and were saying, oh,
Yeah.
look, oh, gee whiz, take a photograph of me with the palace in the background. And 99%, I mean, I've been in London any number of times and I've been past Buckingham Palace occasionally, and I've never seen sight or sign of any royalty. But there was lots of people milling
No,
around,
no, right.
especially tourists, and they were keen to have their photographs taken. So you
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to have a living royal family there.
But the whole I living you use that word. The point about the Palais of Versailles, Jude, is that's where French royalty used to live. Now maybe we could execute all the British royal family and we still have tourism. But the point is, the whole thing is the Sun King lived in the Palais de Versailles,
Yeah,
and all the royal Brits lived in Buckingham Palace and
yeah.
Windsor Castle and Balmoral. By the way, Jude, I was up past Balmoral many years ago, and you know you can see the fact that a hereditary royal family can own all that land and can live in these big castles and are not subject to the freedom of information, not subject to the rule of law in many ways, don't pay taxes on this, that, and the other. Prince Charles owns what, 50,000 or 500,000. I'm down about what is the Duchy of Cornwall or somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. It brings them in 17 million or something a year. Anyway, let me go move on from all this. I was reading on the Observer because it's the only paper, and but not up to speed in some of these things. But I was reading it yesterday, and there was a brilliant article which the BBC, by the way, did not mention. I saw the news yesterday evening.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot of Republicans, not my king, who gathered somewhere in London, and what basically happened, Jude, was they were all arrested. Now these were totally peaceful demonstrators; they weren't doing anything wrong, and they had some sort of agreement prior to was the Met Police. But the minute they arrived, the six leaders, they were arrested and held for 16 hours. Jude, that happened in North Korea. The British media and so on will be going ape shit about it, about the lack of democracy. And the BBC, Jude, didn't hardly mention it. I'd love to know. No, there's about 25%, maybe 30% of Brits who are anti-royalty, who are anti-monarchy.
Mm.
And, okay, maybe 70% of people are pro-for, but where is the right to demonstrate, if not during the coronation? Where's the right to get a bit of publicity to make your anti-royalist views known, but on the day that a king has been coronated?
Coronated, yeah, yeah. I was listening to Nolan this morning. He had Peter Tatchell on, you know, that Peter Tatchell
Yeah,
guy, and
yeah,
he was involved with the whatever the group was called, and he said
yeah,
that they had an agreement with the police that they would be allowed to demonstrate. They were even shown the part of Trafalgar Square where they could do it. Everything was fine, and then on the day when they came, all bets were off. Everything was changed. So I don't quite get
yeah,
that. There's something weird about that now. Either Thatcher's lying,
yeah.
which I don't see why he would do it.
No, Jude. The Observer has got direct quotes from the leaders who said they had an agreement. They went along,
Yeah.
and their megaphones were lifted. The leaders were arrested, and basically they said a lot of people. This law was rushed through the Parliament there quite recently about public protest.
Yeah.
Jude, this seems to be the first manifestation of it. That hold on, the old establishment. By the way, there was a guy on RT, a former Met commander of royalty, and his intolerance to protests about royals was unbelievable. He basically said the vast majority of people in this country, they have got rights too, so the protesters' rights are subservient to their rights. Going, Jesus, that's an unbelievable definition. In other words, the majority should, because a majority says so, a minority has no rights.
But Pat, you know, I'm supposing you were policing this,
Yeah,
and you knew that there would really be fervor for the monarchy whipped up on that occasion.
yeah.
And here's a group of people coming in and saying, you know, essentially, fuck the king. Would you
Yeah,
not be a bit worried that that'll lead to a clash, physical violence, maybe?
Jude, if in a democracy, a real democracy, if 25-30% of the people of a country say, look, we do not agree with this, they go along to the police and they make an agreement that they'll protest peacefully, that they will not interfere with the parade. You know, the right of free speech, the right to demonstrate publicly, it should be a sort of sacrosanct. And the police then make an agreement with these people, but on the morning, arrest them all. Dude, come on, that's straight out of Banana Republic.
That's true, all right. And I mean, some of them said that in the early stages, some of the people who were monarchists were saying, you know, we don't agree with a word you protesters are saying, but we are happy to have you demonstrate because that's the rule. You know, those are the way we run our society. But apparently, it's not the way they run their society. But I see.
By the way,
I was going to say, actually, that revolution group would be very pleased because they got a huge amount of publicity out of it.
We were chatting. I love that the Observer quoted two people from Northern Ireland. I think they're from Ballymena, or I think Ballymena. One was a nurse and one was the two sisters, and one was a carer. And this is when asked about these anti-republicans, of course they condemned them and said, "We know a republic close to us, and they should move there." You know,
very good, very good. Yeah.
I know it's quite comical the way it was put. In other words, anybody that's not pro-royal should move to the Irish Republic.
Go south of the border if they're not from the Republic. Indeed. What else have we to talk about?
By the way, can we change the subject totally?
Okay.
No, I just caught the tail end because I was traveling, but on Friday I caught just a wee bit. No, the Tories. No, the one, Jude, I was involved, and after I retired from the newspaper business, I was involved with a political grouping for a wee while. I was invited to be a director of elections for a guy, and one of the stunts you pull, you know, if you think things are not going well, as the Tory party did it last week, they know the writing wasn't good on the wall, wasn't good, so they said, well, we could lose up to 1,000 seats and so on. And the whole plan is, when you say something like that, is, you know, if we only lose 500 seats, we can turn around and say, look, it wasn't as bad as we expected. In fact, we expected to lose 1,000. This is actually quite a good performance. And the opposition haven't done half as well as they thought they were going to do. So the battle is still on. You know, in other words, you're preparing your base for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the Tories, last Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was, as it Oliver Dowden or something, the deputy prime minister, I can't remember, he came on and he says, yes, we're expecting to lose about 1,000 seats. You know, we're 13 years in power and no government in power and such. Anyway, Jude, the strategists somewhere got it wrong. Not only did they lose the 1,000 seats, but they lost more than 1,000 seats. What Labour Party gained hardly crow a lot. They gained about 500 seats, but the Liberal Democrats, I think, got 462 or something.
Well, they always tend to do well in by-elections, you know.
Yeah.
The Lib Dems.
I think, well, what do you call it? The Tories are now down to 26% and Labour's up at 35% in regard to local government elections. But Jude, what I thought about is that as the whole sort of glory days of the Boris Johnson experiment, you know, that they took the red wall seats and then they took the blue Remainers down south, so they got the double hit. You know, is that all over?
I think so. There was talk of somebody saying, "Oh well, some of the people in, you know, the extremes of the Tory party are still dreaming of the return of Boris." I don't think there's a chance of that now. I thought at one time there was, but I don't think anymore. The thing that worries me most, actually, well, it doesn't worry me, but it's most noticeable, and that is the alternative, and that's our friend Sir Keir Starmer. He really he's a very bad, in some ways, you know, his winning will be worse for Britain, I think, ultimately, than if the Tories won again. If the Tories won again, I would say there'd be a fair chance that Starmer would be ejected. And I would be quite happy with that. But Starmer has backed off on so many things, so many fundamental things. And like things like who's allowed to run. I mean, he's directing that from headquarters. He's saying Jeremy Corbyn can't run and other people can't run.
Diane Abbott.
It's always been the local constituency, but very sensible too, because they're the people that know who's going to come out and vote. And yeah, I'd say Corbyn must be really cheesed off. I wonder, will his feelings of loyalty to Labour overcome his feelings of indignation? And would he go independent, do you think?
I always, Dennis Murray, who used to be BBC correspondent, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. I'm friends with Dennis on Facebook. And Dennis came out with a very, very good analysis. I know I made very much the point that you're sort of making, that who represents the people that Corbyn represents, on the Labour Party. The Labour Party to me is just another version of the Tory Party. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But Dennis made the point, look, Pat, you're looking for a type of Labour Party that existed in the 1940s and 50s, maybe. But today's Labour Party, and they've done all the surveys and they've done all the analysis and so on. And basically, both Labour and the Tories pitched their main presentation on the aspirational classes, the guys who have 2.4 kids, who own a nice car, who go on holidays once a year, maybe twice a year, who want their kids to go to university, all the rest of it. And that's the days of the working class miner is gone, and so on, so on. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, but I take Dennis's analysis because that's where Keir Starmer is definitely pitching Labour, and that's where David Cameron definitely pitched to the Conservatives.
Yeah.
So on. So, Jude, I don't know where like I think two Tory parties in any society is an absolute outrage.
Well,
and
we know that.
We know
that in the state you're living in.
Exactly. Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Dude, I seriously wish that Jeremy Corbyn would stand as an independent. But much more than that, I wish he would launch a party and see how many people really want politics to go back to decency, respect, a bit of compassion, and all the rest, and the old values of looking after each other. No, rather than having, and I'm going to drop this rant now, where the bosses are their salaries are rocketing, where there's been real regression for ordinary workers. Dude, there's something seriously wrong with the system.
Well, nature abhors a vacuum. And the way you're talking, there'd be a vacuum for people to represent the working man in England and even up to middle class. I mean, their needs are not being catered to. So either they're going to vote for the Tories, and they know the Tories are their enemy because they've come through the mill for the last 13 years. Yeah. And if they were discontented with Starmer, as they should be, of course, then there's nobody representing them. Well, then there's room for a party to do so. And maybe that's why the Lib Dems do as well as they do. The thing I fear, of course, is that the British working class is very conservative with a small c. And they tend to, it's a lot of British working class were out there saying, they're great, Majesty and all the rest of it, So you would never underestimate the extent to which the working class in England will support the right wing. But at the same time, I put against that the fact that when Corbyn was leader, they put on, I don't know how many, a couple of 100,000 members. That could have a real impact in politics. When you get people who are willing to go out and pound the pavements, that is really significant.
But here's two things. You're 100% right. It beats the hell out of me how a guy who goes to a food bank can be out cheering for a guy who's going past in a gold coach. Jesus, that does my head in. But the
it's escapism, Pat. It's escapism. It's escapism. Horses. You know the way gangsters. Horses. You know the way the mob in East London, or somebody, or in Dublin, if somebody dies or is shot or whatever, they have these horse-drawn hearses. Finery of all kinds. The same thing applies. I'm not saying Prince Charles is dead from the neck up, but he's
but he could be.
I know that's not fair.
Look at Starmer.
Yeah.
No, it's not fair, but anyway, it's probably the truth. But anyway, see, Starmer can turn around and say, people like you left-wingers, McGartin and Collins, have ever got to know our names. He could just treat us with contempt by saying, look, Jeremy Corbyn couldn't get elected in a million years. And if you're talking about politics, it's all about power. So wait until I get into government and see what I do before you start condemning me. Now, that's the upside. The downside is he has refused to back National Health Service workers. He's refused to back teachers. He's refused to back strikers of any sort who are getting very badly treated. Like what he stands for, Jude, I don't know. I really genuinely don't know.
He stands for him being the leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think that's about it. And getting into power. Right, okay, right, Jude, but I don't know what anybody in Britain stands for anymore. You know, at one stage, the Labour Party under Harold Wilson, you know, it represented the working class, and it was the blue collar worker, and the Tories represented the toffs. Who the hell represents anybody anymore? I'm
Mm.
totally bemused.
Well, I would keep in mind the same sort of question for Irish politics, Southern Irish politics. I think it's not too hard to decide what do Sinn Féin in the north and what do the DUP stand for, or the TUV. Quite clearly, they have one thing, one major bone of contention. In the south, what does Fianna Fáil, what does Fine Gael stand for? I would say hungry for power. I don't think any of them is a particular vision of some kind of society. If they could have a society where there's no Sinn Féin party, I think they'd go for that, all right. But other than that, I don't see they have any vision of society at all. Well, on the other hand, like, you need to give them credit where credit is due. Even without their vision of what way society should be, they have managed to bring in a lot of big companies and have given a level of prosperity to the south. Now, uneven prosperity, but they have given a level of employment and prosperity to the south that otherwise it would never have had.
Yeah. So I was the last day I met two brothers at this function. I was at the family function. I was at that we brought us over to Scotland.
Yeah.
The guy who's living in Scotland is paying 350 quid a month for a beautiful apartment and outside of Glasgow. It's lovely. I genuinely love it because I was in a lovely apartment. It's not the biggest in the world, but it's really neat, beautiful, appointed, you know, and a nice area. His brother is living in Dublin in a one bedroom, whatever it is, paying 900 a month. And you're going, so in other words, the guy in Dublin is paying almost three times more for considerably less. And you sort of go, there's something not right there.
Oh, it's absolutely crazy. I think I see there's another report today, or was it yesterday, where they say that owing to inflation and all sorts of stuff, that projects that were underway have been halted. You know, and we're not talking about 2 or 3, we're talking about a couple of hundred. So even the few that they were given the okay to in building seem to have been stopped in their tracks because of inflation. Well, I mean, the Sinn Féin, from the very day and hour of the announcement of the results, have been hammering at this thing about housing. And I think most people believe they're worth giving them a go at least. And I think that'll carry them to.
I would do. You know what? You know, someone whoever takes on after this is taking on an absolute.
Oh yeah, it'll be a hard job.
Dude, I think it'll be impossible to resolve in one go. It's so bad. To sort of parochialize it a wee bit, I was listening last week. There was a lady on Highland Radio, which is the Donegal local radio station. She had gone into a hospital in Letterkenny for some thing or other, and anyway, cut to the chase. She came on live onto Highland Radio and says, "I've been here 18 hours now." She went in at about 6 o'clock. She didn't see the triage nurse until something like 9 or 10 o'clock. And by the way, Jude, I was thinking of something to do with, you know, a clot or something, which you think would be quite urgent. And then she said she hadn't got any X-rays, and when she came on air, she had been there 18 hours, and she still hadn't seen a doctor. And she said, on top of that, she says there was no priority given to the people who had been there from the night before. So the new people came in, so she was just lost in the system. Now, Jude, there's something serious.
Where was this, Pat?
By the way, sorry?
Where was this?
In Letterkenny General Hospital.
Letterkenny, yeah.
Right. There's just one other sentence. A friend of mine who used to be in the media game, who's now living out in Spain, got a thing from him the other day. He's saying, and he's in the PR game out here. In Spain. He's saying Irish people should look up treatment in Spain because they can jump massively. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but the main point I'm making here is no one should be sitting on a chair in an A&E department for 18 hours who is sick. There's something inhumane about that.
Well, it's a problem. Here's another thing that unites people in the north and in the south. They both have this same ghastly problem. The exact kind of story you're telling is exactly the experience that people here are having. Waiting for a couple of hours for an ambulance, being brought into A&E and sitting in A&E maybe for another 4 hours. It's a broken system, and there are different reasons for it. I mean, again, I think it'd be up to Sinn Féin. Those are the two pillars in which they should be running their campaign. in terms of education and in terms of housing. And they're so fundamental. I think it'll strike a chord with people. I really do. And
yeah, but just go and tell me someone. We're spending in the Republic on a par. I've said this about 10 times in these podcasts, on a par apparently with Germany. Yet our the Republic's outcomes are so much poorer than Spain's, than Germany's. And in fact, we were talking to a young Spanish guy a couple of weeks back, and he said, "Oh no, our health system is very good." We were going, "Jesus, wait a minute, it's the exact opposite from the experience most people in Ireland have of their health service." So why doesn't somebody from both the north and the south head out to Madrid and have a look or a talk with senior health officials in Spain and say, "What are you doing right that we're doing wrong?"
well, one of the best health services in the world, certainly up to fairly recently, was in Cuba. Cuba,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah.
Was an embargo on any goods going in, deliberately impoverished and so on. And yet they managed to produce this world-class health service. People going from all over the world to it. So they must know something. They've also got a very good education system, incidentally. They have a system where the literacy rate is so high, it's unbelievable. What are these guys
doing? They have 97% literacy rate. I read the last time. But the other thing is, well, they were able. The Cubans were able to come up with their own. What do you call it for COVID? The word escapes me. Vaccine. Jesus, it took me long enough to get that word. They were able to develop their own vaccines without the big multi-chemical, petrochemical crowds.
Yeah.
No, so big pharma just didn't get into Cuba, and they have more doctors per population than any other place in the world.
Yeah. It's a wonderful testimony. I mean, it's amazing, simply amazing. And they also had a terrific crop of boxers as well. Anyway, we were going to discuss, Pat, we're out of time now, but we're going to discuss the question of GAA players and the fact that what part alcohol plays in it. Should it be banned, or should they be allowed a certain amount of time to go off their heads, or what? In 10 seconds, what's your...
It always reminds me of the story of Eugene McGee, who was the manager of Meath.
Yeah.
He says, "Know how seriously those guys are taking the All-Ireland final? There's some men in there who haven't had a drink since last Wednesday night." In other words, they're playing on Sunday.
Okay, Pat, on that note, thank you.
All the best, Jude.
Okay, enjoy the rest of your time there.
Good luck.